Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Yesterday, as you may have heard by now, the president fired FBI Director James Comey. The White House says Comey got canned because he overstepped his bounds in the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Now, whether you believe that explanation or not, there's an awful lot of evidence that Comey was the wrong man to run the world's most powerful law enforcement agency, so good riddance to him. Now, under normal circumstances, an awful lot of Democrats here in Washington would have agreed with that assessment. They never liked Comey, they never trusted him, and they had ample reason to feel that way. But these are not normal circumstances. Donald Trump is now the president, which, in the view of the permanent Washington class, means that anything the White House does isn't simply wrong and immoral and stupid, but literally the beginning of the end of America itself. Now, if you watch any of the cable news yappers over the past 24 hours, you've seen it. Jim Comey's firing was a coup. It's the Reichstag fire, the Hindenburg, the Lusitania, 3 Mile Island. Any number of other historical disasters, none of them quite relevant to what actually happened yesterday, but all of them awful. And that's the point. More than anything, though, Comey's dismissal represented, cue the ominous music here, a constitutional crisis.
It's a grotesque abuse of power by the President of the United States. This is the kind of thing that goes on in non-democracies. This is a dark day in American history.
A little whiff of fascism tonight, I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely.
A little whiff of, I don't care about the law, I'm the boss.
What may become known as the Tuesday afternoon massacre at the FBI.
Now, let's clear up one thing right now. It's not a constitutional crisis when the Constitution allows you to do it. The FBI director serves at the pleasure of the president, all presidents, and can be dismissed at any time. And sometimes he ought to be, like yesterday. Politicians sometimes screw up, and when they do, voters get to fire them in elections. But when an unelected bureaucrat with a 10-year term who commands his own army and can put you in prison, what do you do when a guy like that goes off the rails? That's a real problem. In fact, it's the real threat to democracy people on television are always lecturing the rest of us about. That's where we were as of yesterday morning with Comey running the FBI. Now that's been fixed. So no matter how you feel about Trump, you ought to be happy about that. John Nichols is the national affairs correspondent for The Nation magazine, and he joins us tonight. John, I know that we're probably on different sides politically, but I know for a fact, having read your stuff over the years, that you're worried about concentrations of power, and I certainly am too. So if you don't like a president, you think he's screwing up, you can impeach him, you can vote against him. But if you don't like what an FBI director is doing, if he's stepping outside the bounds, that is a real threat to everybody, a much bigger threat than a president you don't like. So why aren't you happy about Comey being fired?
Well, I'm not sure that I would agree with your suggestion that a president stepping out of bounds is necessarily less significant than a FBI director stepping out of bounds. But the reason I'm not happy, yeah. Okay.
But it's still a big deal if an FBI director who is unaccountable to voters starts doing things that he shouldn't be doing. And that's what this guy was doing. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, here's where it gets interesting. There are a lot of people who would agree with the point that he was doing things that he shouldn't be doing at many different points along the way. And if President Trump had come into office having clearly watched Director Comey over many, many months and been very, very conscious of what he's doing, and having talked about him a great deal. If he had come into office and said, you know, very early on, look, this guy is just wrong for this position, and we need to get rid of him, that would have been something that's in the context of what you're talking about here. But what I'd suggest is that waiting this period of time and having your aides and others express confidence in Director Comey, and then at a point where Director Comey is showing up in Congress, testifying, talking about inquiries that touch on your campaign, that is not the point at which you remove him from his position.
Okay, so you don't like the timing, and you don't like Trump, and it's reasonable that you have those positions. I may not agree, but whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that the outcome is good for the country. If I have a persistent cough and against all recommendations ignore it, and I finally one day go to the doctor, you can't say, man, you shouldn't be going to the doctor. No, I should be going to the doctor. I'm trying to fix something that's wrong. And yesterday we saw a persistent problem in the American political life, an FBI director overstepping his bounds, fixed. So why not just say amen?
Well, it happened that last night when it was announced, I was with a group of nuns and lay people doing a talk. And what I was struck by was that they weren't all saying amen. They came from many, many different backgrounds and many, many different traditions. And yet there was a universal concern. And the concern was that timing does matter. and the intents and actions of a president in removing someone from a position do matter. That's why you get concerned about when this happened and how it happened, and frankly, why it happened.
So you're
we can all have our objections to Director Comey.
You're upset about motive, I guess is what you're saying. I mean, that's not really how our system works. I mean, people, you know, famous figures in American history have done the right thing time and again because of political pressure, as you know. Many books have been written about this, movies made. And what we care about is that good things are done. The Emancipation Proclamation is signed, however we got there. I'm not comparing this to that, but I am saying, like, the outcome matters more than anything else. And I just think you can't see that because you dislike Trump so much that you're blinded to him acting in your own interest in this one case.
Well, let me offer you a notion here. I don't think that President Trump has closed the circle on this thing yet. He has removed the director of the FBI. He has provoked a great deal of controversy. He has been criticized by Democrats, but also by Republicans. And quite a few Republicans have stepped up to express concern. For President Trump, the next major act is going to be to pick a new FBI director. And in many ways, that will be the point at which either you're right, Tucker, or I'm right. And if he picks someone who is a sycophantic person, who is someone who seems to be more in his service than in the service of the country and in the service of the FBI, then these concerns that have been expressed at this point are going to be very legitimate.
No,
on the other hand, if he puts Lindsey Graham in, well, then I suspect that you'll hear a lot of people saying that's okay.
I mean, look, here's the point. I'm not administering communion to the president. I'm an American citizen. I'm not as interested in his personal virtue as you appear to be. So I care about what he does rather than why he does it, and I think that's a valid point. But let me just suggest one thing. Part of the problem with what happened yesterday is it increased the temperature. And one of the reasons politically in this country to an almost unsustainable degree. And one of the reasons that has happened is people like you are calling it a coup. You sent out a tweet yesterday. Can you hear me?
I did. I'm sorry. I apologize. It just cut out.
So I'll just sum up. Yesterday you sent out a tweet calling this a coup. Now, you're a smart guy. That's insane. No, you sent out a tweet saying this, coup to Trump. There needs to be a Pulitzer Prize for headline writing, and it needs to go to the New York Daily News. How can it be a coup
I did quote the Daily News headline.
Okay, but approvingly. You're reinforcing the view among the wacko left that this is a coup. But he fired someone who works for him. Is it a self-coup, a self-administered coup? Like, that's nuts. So, like, why talk like that to people who pay attention to your opinion?
Well, because I think that we need to understand this as a very serious moment. And, of course, I happen to be a big fan of the New York Daily News headlines. I think they are very creative in doing it, and that was their headline this morning. My bottom line on this, and in the pieces that I've written about this, is to quote senior members of Congress, people who've been there for a very long time, who are expressing deep concerns about the actions of their president and about the respect of this president and this administration for the constitutional checks and balances and for, frankly, an investigation into this president that ought to be taken seriously.
Okay, but look,
and I don't think that's an irrational
Okay, first of all, it's irrational to call it a coup. It's irresponsible to do so because a lot of people who read your Twitter feed are going to nod in bovine agreement and say that's what it is, when it's not, as you well know. And second, there is an investigation ongoing by the Department of Justice, by the FBI, that is not stopped by this, right? And third, if you want to be totally honest about it, by firing Comey, Trump didn't reduce the amount of attention on the Russia investigation. He dramatically intensified it. So if this is a cover-up, it's the most inept cover-up ever staged. So, like, why not just tell the truth about that? Wouldn't it be easier?
Well, perhaps that gets us into an interesting question, because this president did not apparently take the advice of the Deputy Attorney General, who said that you shouldn't take any action on this lightly, that you should think very seriously about what you're doing. And yet every evidence is that President Trump did take this lightly, that he did not take seriously the removal of the director of the FBI.
How the hell would you know?
And, in fact, that his administration was shocked by this.
How would you know that? Did Trump tell you that? I mean, like, that's a fundamentally unknowable thing. When you can the FBI director, the presumption is that you took it seriously, because why wouldn't you? You know there's going to be I mean, like, why do you think he didn't take it seriously? I mean, I don't know, but, like, I would never claim that I know his motive, because I don't. How would you?
I would tell you that there have been an awful lot of reports that the Trump White House was surprised by the response to this. There were reports that people actually thought Democrats would be excited about the removal of James Comey, and that Republicans would all jump in line and everybody'd be happy. I don't know, and you don't either, whether that is the case. But there's certainly been an awful lot of talk about that today. And again, if you're going to remove the director of the FBI, wouldn't it be wise to take that step but have thought it through enough to have a replacement ready?
Well, I don't know. I guess he'd be probably criticized for, you know, preemptive replacement of the FBI director. I don't know. I'm not a political strategist. I just think that we should all engage in more temperate rhetoric, and I hope you'll join me in that. John, thank you for coming on tonight.